Hello, welcome to Breaking on the Daily. I'm Kel Kidman, and today is Election Day, and so we're going to be talking mostly about election, starting off with Trump winning a Pennsylvania bakeries cookie poll that called the last three elections. Now this is just a fun story, it's pretty light, and, it wasn't even close. But what's interesting to me is that this is happening in Pennsylvania. And for those who have been following the election for the past few days, would know that Pennsylvania is a bit screwy at this point. I mean, we saw just last night, Twitter and Facebook have added warnings to Trump's message about Pennsylvania voting, which is completely ridiculous in light of what's going on in Pennsylvania. For those who don't know, in Pennsylvania, the Attorney General just yesterday, I think it was, said that Trump had no chance of winning Pennsylvania legitimately. And this is the AG, by the way. He taught in a tweet that he put out on the 31st, actually. If all votes are added up in PA, Trump is going to lose. That's why he's working overtime to subtract as many votes as possible from this process. For the record, he's 0-6 against us in court. We've protected voting rights, now ignore the noise, vote. Now here's the interesting thing about that tweet, because he says, oh, we've won so many times. Yeah, after that tweet, if Trump criticizes the results in PA, I'm pretty sure he's gonna lose. I'm pretty sure that record will become 6-1. So that's what that's becoming. But he has walked that back, kind of. He hasn't deleted the tweet. He hasn't really done anything to say, yeah, I disavow that tweet or whatever. It was a mistake or whatever. Instead, he just, put out a tweet yesterday saying, in Pennsylvania, we know how to follow the law and run our elections. We've done it for centuries. People vote, we add up all the eligible votes, and we the people pick the president. And you'll notice there that he drops the Trump can't win language. But the funny thing about that is it's clearly not true, because you see there's another story about Pennsylvania elections from today, from literally this morning, where in Philadelphia, you have a sign outside of a polling place, directly outside of a polling place, that advertises all the Democratic candidates, including Josh Shapiro. And this isn't a one-time thing, you see, because there's also flyers being handed out at the polling places, which talk about who they want to win. And there were even more signs after they took down the first one on a different part of the same polling place. The same sign. Jeez, it's so ridiculous. And of course, the Philly AG has not talked about this, at least as of yet, as of recording this. It is just, man, Philadelphia is a complete mess right now. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we go on to see Philadelphia being the main target of voter fraud and that sort of thing, because it seems as though that's where a lot of this is going to be coming from, assuming that all of this isn't just hot air and it leads to something more substantial. I imagine it will, particularly if Trump doesn't win, which I think he'll win Pennsylvania, frankly. But that's neither here nor there. We'll see later today. I'll be streaming it, as I've already said yesterday. So we're going to be doing that. But on to a next story, and this is more of a serious story. This is actually a report from the New York Times, one of the few good reports from the New York Times I've seen in a while, talking about how the coronavirus in China and how the World Health Organization was investigating it. And what they talk about in this article is the rampant corruption that was involved in this process, about how the WHO wasn't allowing people to know how exactly they negotiated or what they negotiated with, how their experts, the scientists that they were sending over, weren't allowed to actually investigate pretty much anything. And it's very interesting because it also goes on to talk about how 4 of the first 5 coronavirus patients in China didn't actually have a clear tie to the wet market that's been blamed for this. Now, I'm personally of the opinion that this is probably not a man-made virus, but an example of scientific malpractice from a Chinese lab where they were being unsafe with bats and whatever. I believe essentially the story that was put out there in, I think it was April or May, where they were talking about how a guy got like peed on with a bat, and then, he quarantined himself, but he didn't quarantine himself exactly properly, and that was the first case of coronavirus. I kind of believe that. I think that's the most realistic one at this point, particularly how we've seen this going on. This report is very interesting. I have it linked in the description, archived, of course, and I do think you should read it, though it is very long. I mean, you might want to get just another read-up. I mean, I'm giving you one here, but it is worth reading. It is worth reading in full. So I do suggest you do that. And on to even more China news. The Hong Kong chief has been stating that, please don't hurt China. Please don't retaliate against China. Okay, think about the economic issues. Think about the economic interests. And, normally I'd be amicable to that sort of argument. But in this case, I'm not. The reason being, I really hate China. I really am not a fan of the CCP. I think that we should be pretty much in a Cold War state with them at this point. And so what this is very interesting, because this Hong Kong chief is actually a Beijing appointee. So and it comes off all of these Hong Kong protests, and it's right before the election. Obviously, China has been stumping for Biden throughout this entire process. And I think that China is honestly the most important issue of the election. Reason being that especially long term. Long term, China is our biggest threat. And I think that China is in a similar position to where the USSR was in the 60s, where a lot of things were like, well, they look like they have really good economic numbers at this point, and you have a lot of this sort of economic manipulation, and it's very similar. It's a very similar scenario. And I think we're going to be seeing over the next few years China's economy collapse. I think coronavirus, frankly, was the last straw. Though they have seen market growth over the past few months, I do think that long term, it's going to end up being that their economy is fundamentally broken, in that they are manipulating a lot of their currency, they're manipulating a lot of their numbers, because always be aware, any economic numbers coming out of China are manipulated. They are made to look as good as possible. And for a few months there, they could only do where it wasn't falling. So I found that to be very interesting. And as we go forward, I think really you just need to have the strong guy in office going against China, and that is Donald Trump. That's not Joe Biden. Joe Biden is not that guy. He's always been pro-China to a pretty large extent within U.S. politics. He was pro-opening up China. He's pro-China in terms of an economic partner and all that sort of stuff. He's all about that sort of thing. And I think that's relevant. I think that's one of the main reasons to vote for Trump over any other candidate. I don't think any other candidate is as anti-China as Trump is. And I find that to be a positive. I find that to be a massive positive. So, seriously, vote for Trump just for that. And, convince other people to vote for Trump as well. You need to bring out other people, all right? You need to be able to say to your friends, say to other people, hey, vote. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter all that sort of stuff, all those sort of considerations. Though I will say, I am not a huge fan of huge voter turnouts. I'm not a huge fan of people voting just because. I mean, if you have an obligation to vote, you have an obligation, in my view, you have an obligation to vote well. You don't just have an obligation to go out and write down a name or put down, I'm voting for this guy because he has a D next to his name or he has an R next to his name or whatever. It needs to be a deeper sort of, choice. You need to be able to say, I'm voting for this guy because he represents my policy positions well. You need to be an active member of the electorate. You can't be a passive one. I've always been an advocate for this sort of thing. And I do suggest, not that you don't vote, but that you inform yourself. More than anything, you need to be able to say, I understand the issues that I care about, and I understand where all these politicians line up, and I understand who I'm going to vote for based on that metric. That's what you need to be able to say. And if you have an obligation to vote, if that's what you feel like, you have an obligation to vote well, not just vote, period. I mean, so I would say keep that in mind. And you do have enough time in the day, even probably by the time this comes out, to research enough about the candidates to at least be somewhat competent with who you're going to vote for. So, you need to research, all right? That's that's there. But I'm not going to leave you there. I'm going to go on to a more lighthearted story. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have gotten huge social media boost from Indian troll farms. So apparently, this was back in August when Kamala Harris was announced as Joe Biden's running mate. They bought like almost 1 million fake followers from India to bring up Joe's count up to like 9 million. Because because God only knows how many people actually care about Joe Biden. Joe Biden's campaign is a mess. I mean, I've said it over and over in this election. If you look at any other statistic other than direct polling, and I don't even mean just discard polling entirely, because there is aspects of polling that says, yeah, Trump landslide. But if you look at anything other than direct polling, you look at the primary model, you look at who people think the other people around them are going to vote for. If you look at how people feel about their lives now as compared to 4 years ago, if you look at all these sorts of statistics, it very much looks like a Trump landslide, not a Trump loss. It doesn't look like a Biden win. I mean, and I think this election is a repeat of 2012, because Joe Biden and Mitt Romney are frankly very similar candidates in the sense that they only existed to be opposition to the other candidate. They don't have any policy positions of their own, and no one really wanted to vote for either of them rather than just against the other guy. And what that means is that people get tired of that sort of thing really, really quickly. It's really tiring to have to always just be against someone, but never be for anything. It's just boring, frankly. And you're going to see, I think, today, a absolute refutation of the nonsensical election idea that people can just not campaign and win, and can just win based on opposition to something, rather than being for anything. I don't think that's how elections work. I don't think that's how politics works. It's a ridiculous fallacy. And so I think that's what you're going to see today. And I hope it does end up that way. I will be streaming, not until like super late into the night, because I like to actually have a good night's sleep, but, late enough to where we're going to be having some results. And I will be talking about it tomorrow, of course. And, I guess I'll see you then. This has been Breaking on the Daily. Subscribe for more. I'm Kel Kidman, and I'm out.